Clarissa. Okay? Papoose and Clarissa, the boxer at the bottom. And then you have Clarissa and her fiance, Tony Rich. Now, they all been fighting today. It started with Remy blasting Papoose and Clarissa. And then
the internet exploded the second Tony Rich stepped into the chaos and mentioned Remy Ma by name, because this was no longer just quiet industry whispers about Papoose and Clarissa Shields. This had turned into a direct challenge that dragged Remy Ma into the center of a storm she did not start but could not ignore. Tony Rich
and Clarissa joined the chat, started blasting Remy back. Papoose entered the chat, and then Clarissa's fiance came out of nowhere swinging, talking about, now don't let me fuck around and hit Remy. I said, he said, now when I hit Remy Ma, y'all don't be on my nuts. I was like, we don't need to use the word hit because Remy has already alleged that Papoose has been hitting her, allegedly, okay? And so we talked about that.
Did not speak lightly, and when Tony Rich spoke about protecting Clarissa Shields, the tone changed immediately. People weren't just gossiping about Papoose anymore, they were asking why Tony Rich felt bold enough to threaten Remy Ma publicly, and what that said about what was really happening behind closed doors between Papoose, Clarissa Shields, and Remy Ma. Papoose has always carried himself as calculated, loyal, and disciplined, especially when it comes to Remy Ma. For years, Papoose built his public image around standing by Remy Ma through legal issues, industry cold shoulders, and personal battles. That loyalty
last year, and he sent lawyers at me, and it's still up. The video is still the hell up. Because if her team is telling me that this is the reason why she started doing what she was doing, because you wasn't paying attention to her, you wasn't loving on her, you wasn't buying her flowers, you wasn't spending time with her, which I don't believe. And then you had the audacity to beat her. Just like I heard you beat up her side dude, which is the T-Move version of yours. I'm like, how do you feel about beating up somebody that look just like you? How do you feel like beating up?
Between Papoose and Remy Ma became part of hip-hop culture itself. So when Clarissa Shields entered the conversation and rumors started flying that Papoose and Clarissa Shields were getting too close, it didn't just spark gossip, it sparked betrayal narratives. And now Tony Rich inserting himself into that triangle made everything even messier. Clarissa Shields is not someone who moves quietly. As a champion athlete, Clarissa Shields is used to fighting in the ring and outside of it. When Clarissa Shields started appearing alongside Papoose more frequently, fans began connecting dots, whether those dots were real or imagined. Remy Ma's supporters immediately felt protective, and they began questioning Clarissa Shields and
your doppelganger. Like, come on now, that's like beating up your evil twin, your evil spirit. Don't do that. You need them to help you get through life. We need bad, we need evil, bad, good, and all that stuff like that. Don't do that. Don't do that to your brother husband. Papoose, this is your brother husband. Just like Remy. Clarissa is your sister wife. Clarissa is your sister wife. So all five of them can really, please, where's Love and Hip Hop? Somebody find Love and Hip Hop, because we need all five of them in a show. The only person right now that is innocent until proven guilty is Tony Rich, Clarissa Shields.
Tensions. That tension built slowly at first, but once Tony Rich publicly defended Clarissa Shields and warned Remy Ma to stop what he called subliminal energy, the situation went from subtle shade to open confrontation. Tony Rich's words sounded like more than casual support. Tony Rich made it clear that if anyone disrespected Clarissa Shields, there would be consequences. The fact that Tony Rich specifically referenced Remy Ma turned this into a headline. People began asking why Tony Rich was speaking as if Clarissa Shields needed protection from Remy Ma. Was Remy Ma confronting Clarissa Shields privately? Was Papoose caught in the middle trying to calm both sides? Or was Tony Rich escalating something that Papoose himself had tried to keep contained? Remy Ma is not known for backing down. Remy Ma built her career on lyrical dominance and unfiltered honesty. When Remy Ma feels disrespected, Remy Ma responds directly. So the idea that Tony Rich would threaten Remy Ma publicly felt like a challenge. Social media immediately split into camps. Some said Tony Rich was simply standing up for Clarissa Shields because Papoose wasn't doing enough to shut down rumors. Others argued Tony Rich had no place speaking on Remy Ma's marriage to Papoose. Papoose remained noticeably measured during the early stages of this drama. That silence from Papoose made the situation even louder. Every time Papoose posted something neutral, fans dissected it. Every time Clarissa Shields posted a cryptic caption, it was linked back to Remy Ma. And when Tony Rich doubled down instead of walking back his comments, people began to believe that there was real tension behind the scenes. The history between Papoose and Remy Ma makes this even more sensitive. Papoose publicly supported Remy Ma during her incarceration, spoke about her with unwavering loyalty, and positioned their marriage as an example of commitment in hip-hop. So when Clarissa Shields' name became attached to Papoose in any romantic or emotional context, it automatically put Remy Ma in a defensive position. Tony Rich stepping in and framing Remy Ma as the aggressor only intensified the perception that something had shifted between Papoose and Remy Ma. Some insiders suggested Tony Rich felt that Remy Ma's fanbase was attacking Clarissa Shields, believed that defending Clarissa Shields aggressively would stop the narrative from spiraling. But instead of calming things down, Tony Rich's warning to Remy Ma poured gasoline on a fire that was already spreading. Remy Ma's silence at certain moments felt strategic. Remy Ma understands timing. When Remy Ma responds, it usually lands hard. That made Tony Rich's threat look premature to some observers. Why provoke Remy Ma if Remy Ma had not yet delivered a direct response? Was Tony Rich reacting to private messages? Was there communication happening behind the scenes between Remy Ma and Clarissa Shields that the public had not seen? Meanwhile, Papoose's position became increasingly complicated. Papoose had to navigate public loyalty to Remy Ma while maintaining whatever professional or personal connection he had with Clarissa Shields. Every move Papoose made was scrutinized. If Papoose defended Clarissa Shields publicly, it looked like disrespect to Remy Ma. If Papoose defended Remy Ma too strongly, it could alienate Clarissa Shields and validate Tony Rich's accusations. The phrase "Clarissa's fiancé threatening Remy Ma" became the talking point across blogs and commentary channels. Even though Clarissa Shields herself did not initially use the same aggressive tone as Tony Rich, the association stuck. Tony Rich's words created an image of Clarissa Shields being backed by someone ready to confront Remy Ma directly. That imagery clashed with the long-standing image of Remy Ma and Papoose as a united front. Fans began revisiting old interviews of Papoose and Remy Ma, analyzing body language, searching for cracks. They also dissected Clarissa Shields' interviews, looking for hints about her dynamic with Papoose. Tony Rich became a recurring name in these conversations, with many questioning his motive. Was Tony Rich genuinely protective of Clarissa Shields, or was Tony Rich seeking attention by inserting himself into a high-profile situation involving Papoose and Remy Ma? One thing became clear: Tony Rich's threat changed the tone permanently. Before Tony Rich spoke, the story was rumor-driven. After Tony Rich spoke, the story felt personal. Remy Ma was no longer just a wife potentially dealing with speculation. Remy Ma was being directly addressed. That shift meant that if Remy Ma responded, the fallout could be explosive. Clarissa Shields found herself in a difficult position too. Clarissa Shields has worked hard to build a brand separate from gossip. Yet, because of Papoose and because of Tony Rich's words, Clarissa Shields' name was trending for drama rather than achievements. That reality may have frustrated Clarissa Shields more than anything else. Being reduced to a headline about Papoose and Remy Ma could overshadow everything Clarissa Shields accomplished independently. The tension sits unresolved. Tony Rich has drawn a line. Remy Ma has not fully answered. Papoose remains in the middle, balancing perception and loyalty. Clarissa Shields stands at the center of a narrative she may not have intended to escalate. And the question still lingers louder than ever: did Tony Rich threaten Remy Ma out of genuine protection for Clarissa Shields? Or did Tony Rich unintentionally ignite a feud that could permanently damage the legacy Papoose and Remy Ma built together? The tension escalated the moment Tony Rich realized that Remy Ma was not responding publicly, because silence from Remy Ma did not mean weakness, it meant calculation. And Tony Rich should have known that Remy Ma has never been the type to jump without a strategy. Tony Rich continued to speak boldly about protecting Clarissa's shields, and every time Tony Rich mentioned Remy Ma's name, the temperature online rose another level. Meanwhile, Papoose was still standing in the middle, and the longer Papoose stayed quiet, the more people questioned what Papoose was really thinking. To understand why Tony Rich threatening Remy Ma hit so hard, you have to understand who Remy Ma is in hip-hop. Remy Ma built her reputation Terror Squad alongside Fat Joe to her later headline-dominating clash with Nicki Minaj. Remy Ma is not unfamiliar with confrontation. So when Tony Rich positioned himself as someone ready to confront Remy Ma over Clarissa's shields, it felt like a dangerous miscalculation. Tony Rich may have thought he was defending Clarissa's shields, but stepping toward Remy Ma in a public way is stepping into a battlefield with history. At the same time, Papoose has always presented himself as Remy Ma's protector. Papoose stood by Remy Ma during her incarceration, spoke about loyalty in interviews, and constantly reinforced the image of unity. That's why fans felt something deeper when Clarissa Shields' name started appearing next to Papoose's. Even if there was no confirmed relationship beyond friendship or business, perception is everything in celebrity culture. And Tony Rich's threats made the perception darker. Then there is Clarissa Shields. Clarissa Shields is not a passive figure in her own story. As a two-time Olympic gold medalist and undisputed champion, Clarissa Shields is used to dominating headlines for her achievements. But this time, Clarissa Shields was trending because of Papoose and because Tony Rich had spoken aggressively about Remy Ma. That shift could not have been comfortable for Clarissa Shields. Instead of conversations about belts and victories, people were debating loyalty and betrayal. Sources close to the situation began whispering that Tony Rich felt Remy Ma's supporters were sending subtle shots toward Clarissa Shields. Whether those shots were real or imagined, Tony Rich reacted as if Clarissa Shields was under attack. Tony Rich framed Remy Ma as someone who needed to move carefully, and that language alone changed the tone. When you tell someone like Remy Ma to move carefully, you're implying consequences. And when those implications go viral, the story becomes bigger than the original rumor. Papoose's silence started to look less strategic and more pressured. Every time Papoose posted motivational content or business updates without addressing Remy Ma or Clarissa Shields directly, the comment sections filled with speculation. Some fans accused Papoose of disrespecting Remy Ma. Others defended Papoose and said Papoose deserved friendships outside his marriage. But Tony Rich's involvement kept dragging the focus back to conflict. Remy Ma, however, began to shift subtly. Observers noticed changes in Remy Ma's tone during live appearances. Remy Ma did not mention Tony Rich directly, but Remy Ma spoke about loyalty, boundaries, and public respect. Those who follow Remy Ma closely understood the message. Remy Ma does not need to shout to send a warning. Remy Ma's calm can be louder than someone else's aggression. Clarissa Shields also faced a crossroads. If Clarissa Shields publicly distanced herself from Tony Rich's comments, it might look like internal disagreement. If Clarissa Shields stayed aligned with Tony Rich, it could deepen the divide with Remy Ma and Papoose. Every move Clarissa Shields made was dissected. Even a simple post about training could turn into a debate about whether Papoose was present in her life beyond friendship. Tony Rich, meanwhile, seemed energized by the attention. Some commentators suggested Tony Rich may have underestimated the emotional weight of Remy Ma and Papoose's history. This is not just any marriage. In hip-hop culture, Remy Ma and Papoose became a symbol. So when Tony Rich spoke as if Remy Ma could be confronted or challenged over Clarissa Shields, it felt like he was challenging that symbol itself. The bigger question now was whether Tony Rich acted independently or whether Clarissa Shields was aware of the full impact of his words. If Tony Rich moved on his own impulse, Clarissa Shields might have to manage damage control. But if Tony Rich spoke with Clarissa Shields' full support, then the situation between Clarissa Shields and Remy Ma could escalate quickly. Behind the scenes, industry insiders speculated that Papoose was under pressure from both sides. Remy Ma likely demanded clarity. Clarissa Shields likely expected loyalty in the face of public attacks. Tony Rich's boldness may have forced Papoose into conversations he was not ready to have publicly. And once private tension exists, it often finds its way into public behavior. The narrative also began shifting from rumor to power struggle. Some blogs framed Tony Rich as attempting to assert dominance on behalf of Clarissa Shields. Others framed Remy Ma as being disrespected intentionally to provoke a reaction. In both versions, Papoose looked like the hinge connecting two strong personalities. And when strong personalities collide, the hinge can break. What makes this even more volatile is the fact that both Remy Ma and Clarissa Shields have competitive spirits. Remy Ma competes lyrically. Clarissa Shields competes physically in the ring. Neither woman is known for retreating. Tony Rich's threat might have been meant as protection, but it could easily be interpreted as provocation. And provocation can lead to responses that nobody can control once they begin. By the end of this phase, one reality became undeniable. Tony Rich's decision to threaten Remy Ma transformed a rumor about Papoose and Clarissa Shields into a potential full-blown feud. Remy Ma was watching. Papoose was balancing. Clarissa Shields was being pulled into a narrative she may not have wanted. And Tony Rich had already lit the match. The only question now is who would strike next and whether Papoose could prevent the fire from consuming everything Remy Ma and Papoose built together. The situation reached a breaking point when insiders began whispering that conversations behind the scenes were far more intense than anything the public had seen, because while Tony Rich was speaking boldly online, Remy Ma was allegedly addressing matters directly and privately, and when Remy Ma handles something in private first, it usually means she is giving someone one last chance before she responds publicly. Tony Rich may have believed he was controlling the narrative, but Remy Ma has never allowed anyone to define her position without consequence. Remy Ma is not just a rapper with a history of lyrical warfare, she is someone who understands reputation and timing. When Remy Ma battled Nicki Minaj, she waited, calculated, and then delivered a response that shook the industry. That same patience now appeared in how Remy Ma was handling Tony Rich. Instead of reacting emotionally to Tony Rich's threat, Remy Ma reportedly focused on clarity within her marriage to Papoose. Papoose, however, was facing pressure from every direction. Supporters of Remy Ma were demanding that Papoose publicly defend his wife against Tony Rich. Meanwhile, supporters of Clarissa Shields were insisting that Papoose shut down any narrative that painted Clarissa Shields as a homewrecker. Papoose could not speak without upsetting one side, and that silence began to look heavier than ever. What made Tony Rich's involvement even more controversial was the perception that he was escalating something that Clarissa Shields herself had not addressed directly. Clarissa Shields had posted motivational content and subtle messages about strength and focus, but she had not openly attacked Remy Ma. Tony Rich, on the other hand, used language that sounded confrontational. That created speculation that Tony Rich was either overstepping or deliberately intensifying the drama. Remy Ma then began dropping subtle but sharp messages during appearances and online interactions. She spoke about respect, about boundaries, about how certain lines should never be crossed. Even without naming Tony Rich or Clarissa Shields directly, everyone knew who the messages were aimed at. The tone was not emotional. It was controlled. And that control made Tony Rich's earlier threat look reckless. Behind closed doors, sources hinted that Remy Ma had confronted Papoose with direct questions. Was there anything more than friendship between Papoose and Clarissa Shields? Why was Tony Rich comfortable enough to threaten Remy Ma publicly? And why had Papoose not immediately shut that down? Those are not small questions in a marriage that has been publicly celebrated for loyalty. Clarissa Shields, for her part, was also feeling the impact. Instead of media focusing on her boxing legacy, the spotlight kept shifting back to Papoose and Remy Ma. For someone who built her name through discipline and championship titles, being reduced to a storyline about relationship drama could not have been comfortable. That may have been the moment Clarissa Shields realized that Tony Rich's aggressive defense was creating more damage than protection. The public narrative then started evolving into something more serious than gossip. Commentators began debating whether Tony Rich's words constituted an actual threat or just heated language. In hip-hop culture, words carry weight. When someone tells Remy Ma to move carefully, that is not a casual phrase. That implies potential consequences. And when that implication is directed at someone with Remy Ma's history, it becomes headline fuel. Papoose finally began showing subtle signs of strain. Observers noticed fewer public interactions between Papoose and Clarissa Shields. At the same time, Papoose made more visible appearances alongside Remy Ma. Whether that was intentional damage control or genuine reassurance, it sent a message. But Tony Rich's comments were still echoing across blogs and social media platforms. Some analysts suggested that Tony Rich may have misjudged the power dynamic. Remy Ma is deeply respected within hip-hop circles. Papoose has long-standing relationships across the industry. Clarissa Shields commands respect in the sports world. For Tony Rich to position himself as an enforcer in this dynamic may have seemed bold, but it also may have been short-sighted. Because once you challenge someone publicly, you open the door to public retaliation. At the same time, there were rumors that private legal consultations were being discussed. Not necessarily lawsuits, but conversations about boundaries and defamation. If Tony Rich's words were interpreted as threatening, there could be real-world consequences beyond social media drama. That possibility added another layer of seriousness to the situation. Remy Ma's supporters began rallying more loudly, calling for accountability. Clarissa Shields' supporters defended her fiercely, insisting that she should not be attacked over speculation. And Papoose remained in the center, navigating loyalty, image, and truth. Tony Rich, meanwhile, did not fully retract his tone. Even when clarifying, he maintained that he was standing 10 toes down for Clarissa Shields. As this chapter closes, the atmosphere feels heavier than ever. Remy Ma has not exploded publicly, but the calm before her response feels intentional. Papoose appears to be working overtime to stabilize his image and his marriage. Clarissa Shields is trying to redirect attention back to her accomplishments. And Tony Rich has already crossed a line that cannot easily be uncrossed. Now the stakes are higher. If Remy Ma decides to respond directly, it could redefine this entire narrative. If Papoose publicly draws a boundary against Tony Rich, it could shift alliances. If Clarissa Shields distances herself from the threat, it might cool tensions. But if none of that happens, this feud could move from rumor to rupture, and what started as whispers about Papoose and Clarissa Shields could end with permanent damage to relationships that once looked unbreakable.